Hey, what's up, y'all? Happy Leap Year Day, I guess. I don't typically do these type of videos, so I just wanted to do a quick intro for it. But this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and since it's, a leap year, a leap day, leap of faith, Spiderverse, all that stuff, I just think this would be the perfect day to upload, especially Black History Month and the topics of this video. This is something I want to talk about. I'm working on a fitness video for the upcoming weeks, but yeah, there's some stuff where I was just like, I thought this was gonna go one way, but then I started to find a bunch of other stuff out, and it turned into a completely different thing, and some parts get pretty deep. So I just want to say that. Thank you for watching. Fitness stuff is upcoming, and hope you enjoyed the video.
Okay, let's do this. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has become one of the most popular movies of 2023, and rightfully so. Compelling storytelling, a magnificent, enjoyable cast of characters, spectacular animation by incredibly talented artists that continue to change cinema for the better, the ultimate music soundtrack for a mainstream film, and of course, amazing voice acting all around. Booyah! 3 for 3! This film and its predecessor and all those who worked on them truly do deserve their flowers. But one thing I've noticed that has been garnering a lot of attention online is the budding relationship between the main protagonists of these films. Miles Morales, the Spider-Man of Earth 1610, and Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Woman of Earth 65. Many people are loving the slow burn and the dynamic that has been set up between these two for the last couple films, but then there are others who try to find every minute justification for these two not to get together for a myriad of reasons. Honestly, some should be giving these 4 tips for the amazing stretches I've been seeing, but some have also expressed personal issues, and I kept seeing these back and forth on my timeline, so as a colossal fan of these films and the characters, I decided to tackle every aspect of this and leave no stone unturned. Yo dudes and dudettes, I'm your friendly neighbor JaxBlade, and it's been a while since I've done a straight up nerd topic compared to a fitness one, but I've seen this conversation back and forth consistently the last 8 to 9 months, and because I have an unhealthy fascination with this film series since I saw Into the Spider-Verse 27 times in theaters and Across the Spider-Verse 22 times in theaters, and my bro AC Racebest still has me beat seeing Zootopia 30 times in theaters, so fingers crossed Beyond the Spider-Verse keeps that quality so I can tie us. But not only do I love this film series, I really just love this iteration of Miles and Gwen. Shameik Moore and Haley Steinfeld have done a phenomenal job at making Miles and Gwen so likable, so badass, and yet so inspirational, and because both of them are now getting a massive amount of attention in mainstream media, I wanted to see how well Miles and Gwen actually work together and why the internet is so divided on it. So first, let's take a look at how each character came to be and how this particular theatrical Spider-Verse even got started so we can evaluate this fully from the ground up. Miles Morales. He was created after Donald Glover was scrolling the internet and saw on a geek blog site they were making a new Spider-Man film series after the Tobey Maguire one had ended with Spider-Man 3. A comment mentioned that the film should be completely different since the last film series had just finished a little while ago and made a comment about Spider-Man being black. A comment was then posted with Childish Gambino himself as Spider-Man, which he shared to his social media sites where he half joked about wanting to be the new Spider-Man but wouldn't turn it down if he was accepted. Though this caused a campaign on Twitter to get him cast in the role, but as this is the internet, there was some blowback.
He's black, kill him! Like it was so fast.
The role ultimately went to Andrew Garfield, who as Spider-Man crushed it.
You're amazing. Just to take it in for a minute.
Yeah, I can take it in. No, I can take it in.
You are amazing.
I can take it in.
You are amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Miles Morales co-creator Brian Michael Bendis saw Glover's campaign and got an idea. As New York is a culturally diverse city and state, him and his team were inspired to create Miles Morales in their ultimate universe after the death of their Peter Parker. Miles took over and was made a young mixed-race African-American Puerto Rican teen and was officially brought to life August 2011 by Sarah Pacelli's art. All thanks to Gambino and some random commenters on the internet. Godspeed. Glover also got to play Miles in his first animated appearance in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and also got to play Uncle Aaron in the MCU and Across the Spider-Verse. Next, let's talk about Spider Gwen. The idea for Spider Gwen came in the year of 2014 from the group of Dan Slott, Nick Lowe, Jason Latour, and Robbie Rodriguez. Dan Slott suggested Gwen Stacy as a Spider-Woman variant in their Spider-Verse comic run to Nick Lowe, who then ran the idea past Jason Latour, who was skeptical at first because of the canon consequences of her death in the main 616 comic universe, but eventually conceded. Latour's inspiration came from the fact he himself and many mainstream people weren't really familiar with Gwen Stacy as a character, besides the fact that she was killed off for Peter's character progression, a term known in media as fridging, which was infamously coined after Green Lantern's girlfriend was murdered and left in the, you guessed it, It's where primarily a woman is killed, maimed, or depowered to help boost the male hero's arc. He wanted to make Spider-Gwen into not just a strong girl power-esque superhero, but a great hero who just happened to be a girl. Spider-Gwen first appeared in September 2014, drawn by Robbie Rodriguez. Both Miles and Gwen were part of the Spider-Verse comic arc, which I reread through for this video, and it was a fun time for the most part, which leads us to how this Oscar-winning film series began. Apparently, due to leaks, the great Phil Lord and Chris Miller had plans for an animated Spider-Man film as far back as 2014, though the first film was written specifically by Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman. Leaked emails with Sony showed their president Doug Belgard and co-chairman Amy Pascal were planning on rejuvenating Spider-Man with an animated comedy and hired Phil and Chris for the job, but they had requirements. 1. They wanted to cover Dan Slott's Spider-Verse story. 2. Miles had to be the main character. Both choices paid off spectacularly. While initially an underwhelming box office release, the film's accolades spread all across, winning awards left and right, and deservedly so. But the script for Into the Spider-Verse was rewritten several times for several reasons. Some things were modified and some things they wanted to hold off on doing until later on. One of those being the relationship between Miles and Gwen, which Amy Pascal seemed to be a fan of. Damn, Ghostflower shipper a chairman at Sony. Originally in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, there would have been a straight up romance between the two right away, and even a kiss, but they opted out of that for the first film. But when the second film was announced, it was made clear the team would build on that budding romance. But why put Miles and Gwen together? In the entire Spider-Verse comic run, even though they shared the page multiple times, they surprisingly never once talked to each other, and they were becoming some of the most popular Spider people in comics. Real talk, reading Miles and Spider-Gwen comics when they were coming out took me back to that feel of time before the first Iron Man film came out. Cause I knew how cool Iron Man was cause I read the comics, watched the 90s cartoon, and played Marvel vs. Capcom. But back in the day, most mainstream people had no idea who Iron Man even was till his film came out in 2008, and now it's hard to find anyone who doesn't know Tony. That was the exact feeling with these two characters. But things changed in 2017 when they decided to take these two popular spiders and put them together in a comic, Sitting in a Tree. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about any possible major story elements they haven't already talked about or referenced in Into or Across, because we, as of the date of me writing this, which is December 20th, 2023, we don't know how Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to go down yet. But let's talk about the story. The story starts with Miles and Gwen kissing and then flashes back to how it happened. In this comic series, Miles is crossing dimensions to try to save his dad and ends up in Spider-Gwen's universe, who agrees to help him. The two seem to get along well, but as we see at the beginning, we all know the swirl is about to go down.
And vanilla swirl.
Miles and Gwen spend time with each other and go through a bunch of comic book shenanigans and grow to like each other, but don't know where it would go between them, and share a kiss and decide to stay just friends for now. Also, recently hearing that Gwen is now officially part of Earth 616 along with Miles, But rereading this, they really rushed the relationship in a way that most people agree wasn't handled as well as it could have been. I remember reading this on Kindle back in the day, and it became an orange is the new black joke between me and my friends whenever we would talk about Miles and Gwen before the Spider-Verse films ever came out, and even before Gwiles and Ghostflower fandoms even started becoming a thing online. But when they decided to go with this relationship in the movies, I was like, okay, let's see how y'all do it. And in the first film, they planted the seeds pretty damn well and established this budding relationship much better than the comics and in a very organic way. Miles meets Gwen, thinks she's cute, tries to flirt, gets put down but respects her boundaries. And this is something I noticed later on that actually explains why Miles and Gwen can't stop thinking about each other in Across. In the film, Miles and Pete take a bus up to the Hudson Valley from Brooklyn, New York. Two real places in our world, and even in this dimension, if we're going by the daylight changes, it matches how long a trip would take in our real world. They go to get the information they need to make a new goober, and that's when the whole snow battle with Doc Ock takes place and Spider-Gwen saves them. All of them ride back on the bus, where we start to see some chemistry and a friendship blooming between them. And because I was curious, I looked up how long is a bus ride from Hudson Valley to Queens since they were meeting up with Aunt May. And do you know how long that is? A bus ride from Hudson Valley to Queens is about a 4+ hour drive due to multiple stops. If you're just taking a car up, it's about 2 hours. So that means Miles and Gwen talked and bonded so much in that time frame and had such a good impact on each other that Gwen decided to take a selfie on her cell phone and then later on print out that picture and keep it in a safe area. And Across the Spider-Verse, she even mentions it's always great to talk to Miles when they are on the Williamsburg Bank building, indicating they had a long conversation before. If you just watch the first movie as is, it would seem like they didn't talk that long, but paying attention to little things gives you a cool little bonus. I wish we saw a bit more of it, but I understand why a lot of stuff was cut from this first film, because remember, this entire film was practically a gamble. The fact Sony Animation, which had released the Emoji Movie a year prior, had Disney looming over them about Spider-Man, and like a coal under pressure produced an immaculate diamond, says a lot. But also, this is so organic though. I think back to field trips on the bus or plane rides I've been on, when you have those one-on-one talks with a person for hours and learn a lot about each other. I've gone from complete strangers or acquaintances to best friends that way. Hell, I've even developed crushes in that way too, and I'm sure many of y'all have as well, because when you see someone you think is attractive, that's one thing, but when y'all have hours to just talk and you realize you have a lot in common and genuinely bond during that time without excess distractions, the attraction for each other skyrockets and makes you want to be closer to each other. Hell, tell me about your personal travel experiences in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them, sincerely. So this is simple but brilliant writing on that part, and I really hope they have a flashback to their bus talks and beyond. But at the end of the first film, they help each other out. Miles helps Gwen open up a bit after she was so closed off, and Gwen, along with Pete, help Miles become a more confident hero. Miles, Gwen, and the Spider Gang help save the multiverse from collapsing and give each other a just friends goodbye.
That one didn't age quite so well.
Now, usually everything seems just fine in this type of scenario. Seeds of romance planted if they want to go further. You watch the Sunflower music video, it's giving strong Gwen x Miles vibes in some parts. But then, 5 years later, people seem to become extra opinionated on these two. When Spider-Verse 2 was announced in 2018, it was made clear that the film was going to be a love story between Miles and Gwen. And even after that, they had a post later on talking about how there was going to be a love triangle between Gwen, Miles, and Hobie, aka Spider-Punk. Thankfully, they handled it in the best of ways when the film actually came out. But then the advertisements for Across the Spider-Verse began. Now, I don't watch trailers anymore for things I'm looking forward to, or I'll only watch the very first teaser and avoid the rest, because I like going into movies as fresh as possible. And if you watch enough trailers, you can start to pick up the beats of how a movie is going to go and when certain scenes are going to happen. So I actually avoided all Across the Spider-Verse trailers besides the first teaser and Miles' room with him and Gwen. But as I found out later on, a lot of these ads were going heavy on the romance developing between these two, and some folks were becoming quite vocal about their issues with that prior to seeing the film. Oh, don't worry, we're going in on all of them later. But once the film came out, there was simultaneously a lot of love for these characters and their relationship, but also a lot of vitriol for it. A lot of the hate began to go to Gwen Stacy for a myriad of reasons, where many of the very extreme takes honestly gave this underlying feeling that they were just trying to justify their own dislike for the pairing. But what did Gwen even do? Well, in Across the Spider-Verse, Gwen went to see Miles and did the horrific. She opened his collectible figure. I'll never let you do out. They did do her dirty in the film because in the early version, she immediately apologized. Also, she just looked through his sketchbook. You just can't do that, lady. Okay. But in all seriousness, she did know that Miles was an anomaly and also that his dad had to die and did not tell him. Now, at a surface level, that seems horribly bad, but when the film's context is put into play, it adds another dimension, pun intended, to what was going on. I noticed some of these takes begin to appear in the form of, she betrayed Miles, she was leading him on, she actually doesn't care about him the same way, she clearly prefers Hobie, she evilly manipulated him. But there is also viewing comprehension that needs to be applied here when watching the film, and also I'm noticing there's a lack of empathy mindsets.
Empathy, put yourself in the place of me.
Now, an empathy mindset lets you put yourself in someone else's shoes and see what they were thinking going through it and allow you to see if you can relate to the scenario if you were in that situation yourself. Because this is the internet, most people like to move the goalpost and go to the most nuclear, graphic, hyperbolic option that wasn't even being talked about, like, why would I ever want to relate to someone like this who does this horrible shit? And it's like we weren't even talking about that concocted heavy-ass scenario. We're talking about this specific scenario. Or they are just so obstinate in their viewpoints that any attempt that tried to show actual evidence feels like,
No, it was a huge movie. It was the lead. No.
This is something I learned in college. Think of the mind either like a walnut or a sponge. Walnut minds, small, obstinate, hard to get through, and take a lot of force to open them up to a new world. Sponge minds can follow a modified version of this specific Bruce Lee quote. Absorb what's useful, discard what's not, and then form your own path. That can lead to a cleaner mindset. So with that said, let's take a look at Gwen's character in Across the Spider-Verse. For starters, we see Miles simping as not one-sided. Gwen is thinking about Miles just as much as he is thinking about her. She can't draw, but she can play those drums, and when she does, she's picturing Miles because she plays by her feelings. If she could draw, she'd be no better than our boy. She stares longingly at the selfie photo she printed out of them, just like Miles looks at his art book drawings of her. It's been well over a year and she could have grown her hair back to how it was before, and yet she kept the hairstyle Miles originally accidentally caused her to get. When she first meets Miguel, she gets super excited because she sees his dimension hopping watch and says, you can go anywhere with that, because she's trying to see Miles ASAP. But the sad part happens when Gwen's dad shows up. As the chief of police and a single parent, he's the only one she truly has in her dimension, but he still thinks Spider-Woman murdered Peter because their Peter turned into the lizard and Gwen was protecting people and then he got crushed to death. And so now the only person who really has your back and that you really care about in this dimension is now holding a gun at you. So she's forced to go with these two, but we find out they have very strict rules. As we see later on, Miguel has been spamming the thought of one life versus billions of lives into her head ever since she joined up with them, and also the whole Miles is an anomaly thing. So it sadly makes sense why she wouldn't visit Miles right away, because this is her primary home now and she's got orders to follow. But also, because Pete and Gwen care so much about Miles, it makes sense why they couldn't go right away consistently, because they would have eventually told him, and we saw how that went, and hopefully they will give us a great conclusion on how it all works out. But they even allude to this in Across the Spiderverse. Both of them have been talking with Miguel about letting them go see Miles and letting them talk to Miles calmly about this whole situation. But then the Spot thing happened, so everything went down in the most chaotic way possible. But even then, Miguel was not about it because he was so traumatized after letting millions of innocent people die by disrupting a canon event, and so he overcompensated with all his aggression. But later on, once she has a valid reason to go to that dimension again, she immediately breaks protocol and sees Miles right away, literally right in his room. And something people miss here in this film, Miguel was skeptical about letting Gwen to go catch Spot in this dimension. He told Jess to send someone and Jess gave her the go-ahead to go as long as she got the job done. In addition, the bedroom scene is actually really funny when you pay attention to the body language of each of them, because it's clearly two people being socially awkward around their crush. Another thing, just like the first movie, listen to the lyrics of the songs that play during the scenes they are hanging out together in. Mona Lisa, Another Dimension, it matches what they are going through. Hell, go watch the music video for the song Calling as well. And the scene where they are speaking to each other on the building, especially with the script now being available with the little notes added on of how the characters are actually feeling. It basically straight up confirms they feel the same way about each other. However, Gwen knows what happens to herself in other dimensions, so is in a state of, I can't let myself feel because of how this goes with Gwen Stacy falling for Spider-Man, but also I'm scared of all this stuff Miguel said and all this other stuff happening, which are sadly very scary, valid reasons. When Miles was like, there's a first time for everything, right? He's like, I make my own path. And you see her visibly light up and then nuzzle closer to him. When all the spider people are chasing Miles, she straight up says to Jess, my gut feels wrong about this, but Jess practically says, shut up, ignore it, keep going. And then later on, you see her forming an entire squad to go save Miles because she was the only one who can sense he's in another dimension, showing that their bond is stronger than the others. This film is a master of subtlety, subtle body language, facial reactions, movements that just give away how the characters are feeling. A lot of the reactions were relatively realistic for the situation they are in. Also, to go back to the love triangle thing, I'm glad that wasn't something like the typical trope, and the fact that Hobie seemed to like both of them together was a nice touch as well, especially with the nicknames he gave both Gwen and Miles, Gwendy and Peter Pan. So again, it seems pretty cut and dry that they mutually liked each other, it wasn't done out of maliciousness, and they're going to make up and get together and beyond the Spider-Verse. But now that we've gone in depth and shown facts, why are so many people still against it? Well, let's go over some reasons people don't want them together and break down those fallacies. The age gap between them is alarming and creepy. I think some people started making this mistake was because they think this Gwen and Miles are the same as Spider Gwen and Miles, and they still think comic Miles is 13, not knowing he's aged. No, this Gwen is the Ultimate Universe Gwen, and don't get me started on her whole convoluted story. She is, or was I guess, is confusing, older than him by a good amount. In the comic Sitting in a Tree, they have a back and forth about their age gap. Miles was 16 right about to be 17, and Gwen was 18 in this story. Miles even remarks she's barely 2 years older than him since his birthday was coming up, which is a colossal difference than Gwen being 18 to 20 and still thinking Miles is 13 or 14, because then yeah, those concerns are justifiably valid, and call this man immediately. So I feel like that was a big thing that was misconstrued, but the thing about comics is a lot of characters just have inconsistent ages and various issues. For example, Miles himself, for all the actual in-universe years he's been active, and storylines, and him college hunting and on and various issues, he should be a grown-ass man by now, but they still keep him in his late teens for various Spider stories. So it makes sense why some people would mix some of them up and make the age gap actually seem larger between the two.
But even though the majority of people don't have an issue with a 2-year age gap between two teenagers, unless it's something like 13 and 15, because they can look so vastly different at those ages, it is one of those situations where I think it is just so much smarter that they decide to make it just a 1-year gap and make them younger in the Spider-Verse films. Because in the films, Miles is 14 and Gwen is a year older than him.
15 months, but...
And then in Across, it's a year later, so Miles is 15 and Gwen is 16.
Miles has better chemistry with Margot, aka Spider-Byte, and should get with her instead. Now, while Margot was in Across the Spider-Verse for a short time, I thought she was pretty dope. I really dug her mask aesthetic, and it was sick how she moved around as Spider-Byte. But while she is great, let's look at this narratively. Being completely objective, that'd be kind of a poor narrative decision on the creator's part, because think about it like this. 2 full films of mutual buildup versus, and you can go on YouTube to this clip right here and time how much they spoke to each other, which was exactly 46 seconds of dialogue between the two. And beyond, there's going to be so much going on. They got to deal with Megaspot, they got to deal with Miguel and the Spider Society hunting them, Gwen, Pete, and Miles all making up, saving Miles' dad, seeing how Prowler Miles is going to be, and probably a lot of dimension hopping. It would just be too much and too fast, and you saw how well that worked out in Rise of Skywalker. Though not gonna lie, it would be funny if there was a spark between her and Prowler Miles. But moving on. Gwen belongs to Peter. Why is Miles getting Peter's sloppy seconds? Give him his own love interest. This is usually the first take a lot of people see, but a couple things they need to realize is Spider Gwen is not mainline Gwen. Yes, she had a nerdy Peter Parker who in this verse became the Lizard and died. And yes, her dad is the chief of police. But this Gwen Stacy as a character is fundamentally not the same Gwen Stacy that dated mainline Peter Parker. She's also not the same as this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. She is literally her own character. Matter of fact, that's how she was designed. They didn't want the prompt to be like, this is Spider-Man's girlfriend or little sister. They wanted her design to feel like anyone could be under the mask. But when you read a few Spider-Gwen comics and watch the Spider-Verse films and then compare and contrast her to the original Gwen, the main thing she herself shares with that Gwen is her name and blonde hair. Other than that, she is basically an original character, and she's not Peter's property and can only ever date Peter. Because on to my second point, it is okay if in different universes, superheroes have different love interests. You can have Batman with Catwoman, but also a lot of people dug Batman and Wonder Woman in the Justice League cartoon. Usually it's Hawkman and Hawkgirl, but Justice League showed us how great Hawkgirl and Green Lantern could be. Spider-Man himself is known for Mary Jane, but has also had many other relationships. A perfect example of this is in the 90s cartoon when they tried to make it seem like Mary Jane is the best love interest for this Pete, when in reality, and I don't even think the show realized they did this, they made the dynamic between him and Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, much better and much more engaging in this specific universe. Him and Felicia were actually good friends prior to getting their powers. And yes, in this show, Black Cat had powers and they turned her into a fine-ass super strong waifu. The most frustrating thing about this show was Pete clearly liked Felicia and Felicia clearly liked Pete, but then some BS would come up and then Spider-Man would save Felicia and she'd start liking Spidey, but because of all the superhero danger BS, it never worked out. And they had this whole arc I hate where she gets with It's Morbin time, but then she gets her powers and they start getting close again. The thing that drove me mad is they never figured out each other's secret identities in this show. There are moments where they are literally about to, but Spider-Man stopped it. But in the Secret Wars arc, they bond and share a kiss, and it makes it clear the story is trying to tell us Pete is better with MJ in this show, but all it's really doing is showing us that Pete and Felicia should have been endgame for this specific series. In every other universe, Black Cat is like that, you know, sexy fling that you have, but here, she could have potentially been an endgame. Just like for this specific series in Spider-Verse, this dynamic between Miles and Gwen works. But here's the thing, it also doesn't mean they have to be each other's end goal in every piece of media they appear together in. Miles works well with Haley in the games, Miles works well with Tiana in comics, Miles works well with Spider-Gwen in the movies. Now, if they wanted to bring this relationship of the two to other media, it has to be exceptionally well written first, and not just, yeah, well, let's buy OTP, random bullshit go, yay, now they're together, yay. But even then, that can cause an issue if not careful that I'll talk about in an upcoming section. It was bad in the comics, why try to redo it again? This is one of those takes where I gotta go, huh? Over the years, there have been so many redos and reboots of certain things that improve upon concepts that were poorly handled before. There's a lot of 80s cartoons like this, though I wouldn't say the OGs are necessarily bad, they're just products of their time to sell toys, and the reboots were made with more depth. Again, going back to this Bruce Lee quote, a great reboot utilizes absorb what's useful, discard what's not, and add what's distinctly your own. These reboots did that, and many agree, besides people with nostalgia goggles fused to their brain, that they are actually improvements to their predecessors. Hell, if you're a fan of The Boys TV show, many agree is vastly superior to the edgy for the sake of edginess comics. If something is an interesting concept but was handled poorly, you can always improve upon it later on. Again, sponge mindset. That's why Miles and Gwen are handled great in the films, but were kinda okay in the comics. That is completely debunked, so what's next? They should stay friends and not end up as a couple. Not every boy-girl relationship has to be a couple. I didn't get any love vibes between them. This is one of those situations where I can understand a certain movies and series where they get a boy and girl together for something as simple as they stood next to each other, they in love. Most agree that's pretty meh. But honestly, after seeing how Miles and Gwen evolved and how their relationship was written and practically everything in addition to that has also been building up their relationship, music videos, advertisements, the script, the actors, and the team that worked on Spiderverse. But also there is one big point that I'm gonna cover in the next complaint because it's something I realized earlier this year. But to continue this, to the people who say I didn't get any love vibes between them, what movie did you watch? Was it this? Are you being obstinately blind? Because I don't know about y'all, but if IRL I saw, quote, two best friends, unquote, connecting comparable to this in a secluded area by themselves, I can read the room and I'm gonna be giving them their space. Honestly, when people say that, it gives me a flashback of when I was with a group of friends at a convention and one of our male friends had met one of our female friends and they hit it off and they were talking, laughing, and then they went off on their own and we had just got done doing a panel walking around the con in a secluded area. We saw them clearly bonding and getting close, and two of the people in our group were like, hey, let's go hang out with them. And I had to stop them, like, read the room, they'll join us when ready. And they were like, but they're just friends. And I was like, bro, let them cook. We'll message them later. And oh, they cooked all night long. All night. Maybe this is why I got extra invested in these two, not in a weird way, but because I hate to brag, I'm like the goat of wingman to have on your side. If I know any of my friends, male, female, non-binary, are crushing on someone at a place we're at, I will smoothly do everything in my power to hype him, her, them up casually and get them and their crush to talk and then gas them up even more to generally look as great as possible to their crush. Also, if I know for a fact each party likes each other, it is a wrap. So yes, this again is easily debunked. But now, onto the biggest and most controversial part of this video of why people do not like seeing Miles and Gwen together. Blatant racism. It is a shame we're in the 2020s and this is still very prevalent, and I'm happy that for a lot of people these days, it's a non-issue. And for some, they are even confused that people still go by this. But sadly, there have been a lot of people from different sides, different races, different colors, etc., who just don't want to see them together because they are different races. Oh, blacks only with blacks, whites only with whites. And some, though not all, will use the complaints we mentioned previously as a mask to cover how they really feel about this relationship. Some have been caught doing this very thing, so it makes the bombastic side-eye of Sauron very strong at times. But let's break this down piece by piece, because there's sadly different categories of this. 1. Some people think Miles only went after Gwen because she was white. That is not true at all. Corey Coleman from Double Toasted actually brought this up masterfully here.
Miles Morales did not go after this girl because she was white. It did not, this was not a forced relationship. It just so happened that Miles Morales was a black character. Gwen Stacy already exists in the comics. They made them two characters in the book. And I think I personally think it's more insulting for a studio to say, well, we cannot let them be together, even though it's a natural thing for them to actually get together because Miles is black. To me, that's insulting. That goes back to saying that he couldn't do this because he's not good enough.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
2. Some people think it's better that Miles has a white girlfriend over a black one, because to them, white girls are more attractive and so they gas it up, whether they be another race or they just being an Uncle Ruckus. First off, people like this with the "if it ain't snowing, I ain't going" mentality sometimes act like black women can't be beautiful or good partners when there's tons of gorgeous, strong black queens out there IRL and in media. But of course, this is social media. Practically everywhere you see online is naturally hyperbolic. People say whatever just because they want attention, but let's keep it 100. Most of them, if they were alone with any of these women and this party was interested in them, I can guarantee 99.999699999% would fold and become hypocrites in one night, because I've met too many, and I do mean too damn many of these fools in real life, and they'll call me an A+ yapper for putting them on blast, but those fools definitely triple S rank then for the fact they are nothing but talk. But again, like most healthy relationships should be, theirs isn't based on skin color. It was based on relatability to each other, chemistry, and enjoying each other's personalities. Personality mashing is S tier for healthy relationships, and this relationship is not being presented in the films as this type of love is superior to this type of one. It's just a romantic slow burn. Because going back to what I was talking about earlier with the different love interests and replacing someone else, sometimes that does sadly happen, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally in some media. There's a trope known as the disposable black love interest. You've probably seen this in quite a few series, where they'll introduce a black girlfriend or boyfriend who can be really cool and full of personality, but turns out they're more so a placement holder character who we all know is going to be replaced eventually with the true love interest later on. Sometimes it's handled okay, sometimes it's handled so poorly it makes the other party look bad and like they aren't worthy of being truly desirable, and that can be hurtful to see. Sometimes they'll kill off or even make a character go out of character and be so unlikable that it now makes it more reasonable for them to break up. But for this specific scenario with Miles and Gwen, that is not the case, because like Corey mentioned earlier, he wasn't specifically targeting her for her race, and Miles wasn't replacing an already established love interest he had in the film. If anything, from how they built it up in these films, that would make Miles the disposable black love interest in this case. If and beyond, stuff doesn't turn out well, but I don't think we have to worry about that. Keep watching. Some people say, why couldn't Tiana Toombs be his love interest in the movies? Well, for starters, that character didn't exist until 2019, and they'd been working on Spider-Verse 1 well before that, and it released in 2018. And it was made clear they made their mind up this was the story they wanted to tell and focused on these spider-themed characters primarily. And that is okay, because again, like I mentioned earlier, not every universe has to have the same love interest. Another very well-known example of this is Dick Grayson, aka Robin/Nightwing. Sometimes it's all about him and Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl or Oracle, and then sometimes it's all about him and Starfire. If it's written well, they both will work well. Next, number 3, there are too many interracial relationships in media these days.
Gotta keep the bloodline pure because you don't want no half-breeds running around, even though Miles himself is Puerto Rican and black.
But here's something I found out earlier this year that I think is rather interesting. Back in July, I watched the film Nimona on streaming with some friends. At the end of the film, there's a kiss scene between the main protagonist and his boyfriend. But then I started to think of something and it sparked discussion between me and my animation and animator friends. And I will pose this question to you watching. Now, I'm going to be very clear and very specific with my word choices because if I wasn't, I'd have an influx of answers right away. So, have you ever seen a mainstream, theatrical, animated film where a human black male lead had an interracial lip-to-lip kiss? Now, before you answer, let me break down the key points I'm asking. Mainstream theatrical, meaning it had to be in theaters worldwide, not streaming first, not TV, and it's popular enough to be mainstream like, say, The Avengers or Shrek or Toy Story, etc. Animated film, cartoon, animated movie, not live action, where a human black male lead, not black female lead in this specific case, specifically had an interracial lip-to-lip kiss with a white woman or a race that wasn't their own. I'll give you some time to think about it, but remember those exact key terms. Done. How many could you think of? Do you know the closest we could come up with that sadly do not count with the terms laid down? 1, Shark Tale, because Will Smith fish kissed Angelina Jolie fish and Renee Zellweger fish. 2, Elemental, where Water Wade kissed Fire Ember because their actors are black and Asian. 3, Encanto, because this lovely couple kissed, but apparently it doesn't count, and there was an argument of they aren't black and white though, because they are just light-skinned and dark-skinned Latino, and I am not gonna touch that. That is for all my Hispanic, Latino, Spanish-speaking friends, etc. Now on television, streaming, and live-action film, we've been seeing this on both sides all the time more and more, and really showing how much we've progressed. Hell, MCU Spider-Man is kissing Laura Harrier, Liz Allen, and Zendaya MJ. That boy down with the swirl. And in animated film, we've seen black women and non-white women kiss their opposite, but it's wild this 2023, we still haven't seen much of a black man doing the same thing in animated theatrical films. So from the bigger standpoint, Miles and Gwen and beyond could be one of the first for that very thing on the animation big screen, and that's greatly amazing. Because even though we're better than we were in the past, a lot of people don't realize that even back in the 90s, a lot of people still had issues with seeing this. If you remember the DCOM, Disney Channel original movie, Don't Look Under the Bed, this was something the creator had to go through when trying to film the ending.
And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, there's a kiss at the end of the movie where Larry kisses Frances. And I said, yeah. I said, well, how do we say this politely? She's white and he's not. And I said, yeah. And I said, guys, it's like the end of the 20th century here. What's the problem? But they had some concern about some of the Southern affiliates, particularly, not being happy about that. You know, and I really talked to the Disney folks about it. And they came back to me and said, you know what? You're right. This should not be.
Another incident of this happened with Gabrielle Cateris and Carlton himself, Alfonso Ribeiro, where she was told not to hug him on TV because he was black and she was white.
Alfonso, because he had done such a great job in making me feel safe, I gave him a big hug. And the producers said, that was unbelievable, Gabrielle. Tomorrow when we, do it live, the only thing we're going to ask is please don't hug Alfonso. And I said, why? And they said, well, he's black and you're white, and Middle America, I got to tell you, Middle America's blamed for everything. And they said they don't want to see, they can't accept that. And so I was so pissed that I said, oh, of course. And so I told Alfonso, and I said, so tomorrow when we do the show, I'm going to kiss you. And so when we did the show, I did.
And of course, how can we talk about this without referring to the iconic first ever interracial kiss for TV, Kirk kissing Aurora in Star Trek, and the colossal risk it was? Apparently, this has sadly been a thing in Hollywood for a while, even thinking back to the Disney Star Wars sequels with Finn and Rey. The first film did a good job at setting them up as potential, possible love interests, but the next two films immediately shot that down. Even in places like China, they made Finn himself smaller on the poster, something Phil Lord even called out on his Twitter about how he was grateful the Across the Spider-Verse didn't get the same treatment. You see this stuff and it reminds you of how shit was back in the day. If these sort of relationships happen, black people would be severely punished for them, black men especially. And I rewatched the film Holes recently with a friend, and it's heartbreaking how true the flashback scenes of Kate and Sam's relationship and consequences were. Hell, in some areas of the world, it still is that way. Now, I'm not going to go too super deep into this, but there are times when I see people so insanely against Miles and Gwen, like, that's not right because they aren't the same color. What year do you think we are living in, and how can we move forward as a society and species if everyone keeps trying to regress? I've mentioned I've met people like this in real life who acted like I'll only ever date this race of person and nothing else, and nothing will ever convince me otherwise. And if you got your own quote-unquote preferences, fine. But if you're projecting your own personal issues onto other people in that type of way, the level-headed ones are not gonna listen to you. And the people I knew, some of them grew as people, because in life you live and you learn. They ended up switching from that mindset because they either met someone in their school class, met a coworker who they bonded with at their job, or met at a convention geeking out over the same stuff, etc. And they realized, oh snap, we have the same interests. They're making me smile. They're fun to talk to. I'm connecting with them. Wow, they generally looked out for me when I was at my lowest. Wow, you know what? They are actually kind of cute. I know the internet has a negativity bias where it's easier to hyper-focus on bitter, jaded, painful, angry things, but to think, oh well, they did all that stuff, they shown they are nothing but green flags to me, and I find them cute, but because they're that color, can't be with them. That is objectively ridiculous. But again, that's the thing online. You see this type of stuff everywhere, where someone makes a completely asinine claim and is obstinate in their viewpoint on the claim, and then someone with a level head responds with sources, reason, and are actually proving their points rationally, logically, with critical thinking skills and facts. And then the party that said the asinine claim, most times instead of just owning up to it, will now usually do these 5 things that I feel like these two with how often they're easily predicted. 1. Move the goalposts of the discussion and try to deflect and ignore all the main points that were made. 2. Put words in the other person's mouth they didn't say, trying to strawman or just intentionally try to misunderstand their point because they don't like them. 3. Respond with reaction emojis, images, GIFs to try to ratio the party that just embarrassed them with facts. 4. Ignore, mute, block. 5, and this is the big one you'll see all the time, irrationally transcribing the events in their mind and will call the other person the obstinate one and make them out to be the bad guy who antagonized them first when talking about this very situation in the future. But again, it's one of those situations where when emotions are high, logic is at an all-time low. Where when level-headed people neutral to the situation see what really happened from the outside in, they can see it and be like, nah, I can see who is actually in the wrong here. It is one of the reasons why I talk so much about mental health issues and how to improve that on this channel. Because I used to have horrific anger issues when I was younger and overreact and get heated very easily. And I want to help people grow from thinking they're alone in that and how to get a healthier mindset. Here's a playlist for people here who are interested in trying to better themselves that way. But let's head back to Miles and Gwen, and let's also talk about the potential of the kiss scene between these two, and not an inappropriate makeout sesh, that's completely different, just a simple kiss scene. Now, I remember as a kid getting hyped for kiss scenes between characters finally happening, like sporting events, and that shit still hits. If I'm watching a show and two characters they built up slowly finally go for it, majority of the time I'm like, let's go, boy! Let's go, boy! I remember being 14 at my friend's house and we both started sports yelling for KP and Ron's first kiss when we watched the So the Drama movie. But also Aang and Katara, Inuyasha and Kagome, Robin and Starfire. But also sometimes media does cop-outs. You know the ones I'm talking about. They won't show the characters kiss, but what they will do is the characters doing that head-to-head, you know, consoling each other thing. A hug, hand holding, the kiss is interrupted, they'll do it off screen with the other characters' reactions, they'll allude to it, or just flash forward where they're married but we didn't see anything. I'm gonna be real, even to me, a muscular adult man, that's always been very annoying to me because the kiss is like the lock and key sealed moment when it finally happens. But also sometimes the lack of it does make me side-eye. Now I want to say this, I have nothing but complete faith and love for everyone working on Beyond the Spiderverse, and I trust them completely. Especially since they keep saying they want to make this the most satisfying conclusion that it can be.
It will be a very satisfying conclusion. It goes even more emotionally deep into the relationships between Miles and Gwen.
That is all I needed to hear to know we're in good hands. But it was one of those moments where before I heard them say that, my mind was going to the, you know, if these two don't get together, it will be the only Spider-Man film series where the main character had no romance. It is one of those moments where you look at every other Spider-Man film and them getting to kiss their love interest, but if they make Miles and Gwen do that off screen, don't do it at all, or only insinuate it with all the stuff I talked about in this video, I def would be side-eyeing hard like, But again, I have nothing but faith in that entire team and wish them all the best in knocking it out the park and making a perfect trilogy. And I'm so happy for all the accolades they've been winning because all of them truly do deserve it. Miles and Gwen are a fun pair of characters to see. I love seeing how much love both of them have been getting. Shamik Moore and Haley Steinfeld have done an amazing job of bringing these characters to life on the big screen with their voices and should be proud of their immaculate work. Originally, I didn't think I'd go as in depth in this video, but as I went along, I noticed there was just so much information that needed to be said, and also just to inform people who may have just had a surface level understanding of something that turned out to be bigger than expected. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to share it with people around, whether they be a Ghost Flower shipper or people who are just curious about this topic, and let me know in the comment section down below what you think, and let's get a discussion going. And if you made this far in the video, type Miles X Gwen Forever in the comment section. It lets me know who watched the video all the way to the end, and be sure to hit that bell icon and subscribe, and give me a thumbs up.
But hey y'all, thank you for coming out. I don't get a chance to do like these just nerdy topics in general, so I'm glad whenever I get a chance to do them in leap year, leap day, you know, leap of faith again, like I said. It's just a fun time. I'm glad I got to share that passion with y'all, and I didn't think I'd go as deep as I did, but like I'm happy I did do that. Again, for people who are curious into like more analytical stuff, I got entire playlists. You can check out my Mega TMNT video, all that stuff. Like I like those type of videos. We're actually working on a movie TMNT mega review too, which will be fun. But again, most of my stuff is primarily fitness stuff to help y'all improve physically, and if you want to do that, got tons of stuff here for you as well. Like you can be nerdy and just also like get in shape too, so I hope that helps. It's been a hard couple months, but I got this nice little gift from one of my clients who my dog passed away recently, so this little thing right here is like I love it. It's like just a beautiful thing. And thank you to everyone who gave me support during these hard times and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been rough, but I'm gonna keep moving forward, and I really appreciate every single one of y'all with your, you know, love and support. Y'all are goats in my eyes, king, queens, non-binary reals, all that jazz. But yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. And remember, like I always say, keep calm, booyah on, and don't forget, momentai. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and you know, go find some love like those two.